We'll start from the line that begins with ha-zeh. That is 8 lines from the top, as I can see quickly. So we pointed out that there was a tzimtzum in the Oyer Soif, and the entire Oyer Soif was concealed, not to be recognized, but what remained of the Oyer Soif is the Nekuda's Horashimu, the impression. As we explained, that since that Oyer Soif, and then similarly in our Moshel, what we call light of day, is not a functional light. It is a light that has its own fundamental reality. Therefore, that cannot be removed without a trace, so to speak, because the reality of it remains. Except that the full expression, the full hispashtus of it, it can be concealed, but the element that this is a fundamental reality of light that cannot be removed.
Oh, you may think it cannot even be reduced.
What?
You may think it could not even be reduced, but we're learning it can be reduced but not removed.
Okay. Now, as far as reduction is concerned. The reduction is what's called reduction in hispashtus. It's not reduction in the essential message, but in the hispashtus. Let us take again our metaphors. We already labored through this. We say that the human being is an atzmi in the world. He has an essential presence, as we discussed it many, many times. A God-given presence in the world, such that he can actually own parts of the world. But no one is allowed to venture in, because he owns it. Not only is that a possibility in the human being, but this is an imperative. The human presence requires that he has a home. Like we say, Odom she'eino bayis she'eino yodom. This is why every human being has a name. A name means that it represents an essential presence, a real being. When does he get a name? Not when he begins to become a millionaire. When he's born. We give him a name. And this name really says, hey, there's a real entity here. That's a human being. Now, this human being, as you said, has the ability and an imperative element actually to occupy a space, to have a home. And in this home, as we pointed out, in this home, in his own home, there is not an inch that is devoid of him. He's in every little corner of this home. As we say in analysis, that you cannot walk into his home without his permission, even if you don't affect him at all, much less settle there. Because why not? I'm not troubling you, I'm not bothering you, I'm not disturbing you. If you step into this, in this inch, you're stepping on me, because my presence is everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So now this human being has a home 20 by 30. Then he decides he wants to move into a condo, and the condo is 20 by 20. Has he become smaller?
But by the nimshal,
On the other hand, if he expands his home
right, he doesn't
to
have
50 by 50, does he become bigger?
Right. Okay, so here by the nimshal, for some reason or somehow.
There is in every etzem there is a hispashtus element.
Yeah.
The hispashtus that can be increased and decreased, but it doesn't affect the reality. Where his presence is recognized, doesn't affect the reality.
Okay, and why and how?
And this is why. I'm sorry, what?
The why the hispashtus would be reduced. That's like
That's by his
that's
choice.
his business.
That's by his choice.
Uh-huh.
He lives in this kind of home, this kind of home. Like we said, I don't want to deviate. If you give a person a private residence of the expense of an Empire State Building, he says, I don't want it.
And that shows on, there's a limit to.
That shows that in his home, the home he relates to not only by his monetary capability, but by his intelligence. That to which he cannot extend, his extension he doesn't want. He wants to feel that if he becomes bigger, like a king, a palace can be of any size. Did you ever visit the Louvre? Anybody? Monsieur?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. 10 times the size of the White House. And the French kings who were haughty and disgusting, they felt comfortable in it. They even had their own torture chambers downstairs. All right. So this is the answer to this. The tzimtzum is the hispashtus, but the essential truth cannot be removed.
Cannot be removed. This is he chooses not to remove it. I mean, what cannot be removed? He ensures that it remains. This is how we.
Yes.
Okay.
And what does it mean? He ensures that it remains. Once there is an oir, once he had declared, I'm here, so I'm here. Yeah, he can declare, I'm not here. I move out of this country. Finished. But as long as I'm here, I'm here. When the Rebbe decided to create the world, when Asma decided to create a world, and he had to remove the oil, he decided to be mitzamtzum the oil, not to remove it, because removing them there is no world. Like we say in our own, in the nefesh ha'odom. The nefesh ha'odom, as it begins from chochmah, which is, so to speak, a conscious intellectual and recognition. But what gives it real substance is the fact that there is a neshama behind it. not the intellectual, the neshama. The neshama element remains in a nakuda of emunah. If the neshama elements are removed, then there is nothing there. All right, so we are
ha-zeh.
What?
Ha-zeh.
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 So this oil, we said, it has a nakuda, but it is only a nakuda that includes the entire oil. But this is ein etofes mokim klal legabe oil esav shelifnei hatzimtzum. It has no significance, no comparison relative to the oil esav that prevailed, that was begilui before the tzimtzum. So, how do we understand that? If this is the oil that that has in it the you know what? Let's learn one more line. But in truth, included in this nakuda, gam bechinas atzmus hoir. Also, even the etzem hoir, the beginning of etzem hoir. The etzem hoir, which is representative of atzmus, eine be'erech or begather elam es klal. That is totally beyond world, and world cannot be drawn from etzem hoir. K'mishikosu b'makim acher. Rak shezeho behelam. Except that in this nakuda, the atzmus hoir is behelam. So, let us try and kind of differentiate and identify these various states. The oil in Seif Shelifnei HaTzimtzum, this we said, this is the hispashtus. And then there is a tzimtzum, and the tzimtzum contracted or constricted the hispashtus. But there remained a nakuda, which is a trace of this etzem hoir. And this trace is not comparable in the biyarach to the eres of shelifnei hatzimtzum. So now, this is a nakuda that this is the nakuda of the, so to speak, the essential element of the soil, that remains, and that trace of it remains even after the tzimtzum. So, how does that compare relative to the oil that was hispashtus before? The oil shelifnei hatzimtzum. And we're saying no, relative to the oil shelifnei hatzimtzum, this is ein biyarach. Only one nakuda of it remains, but essentially the Oyin Shelifnei HaTzimtzum is a much brighter and greater oil. And yet, that was able to be nistamtze. The hispashtus of it was able to be nistamtze. So here is where we have to. Again, there's a subtle point that needs to be, we need to put on our thinking caps. Why is there hispashtus of Ein Sof? Like in the case of our morsel of the home. A person enters the home. Is he pushing himself into the home? And if he expands the home, he has to expand himself?
What was the question? Why is there hispashtus?
Why is there the oil in Sof, the oil in Sof that's mispashit? It's Ein Sof. What?
See, Atzim is so true that its truth spreads everywhere.
It's everywhere. Therefore, this hispashtus represents the truth of the answer. It's not a chitzoni ziki hispashtus.
How is there aware with Atmos?
What?
You mentioned last night, like aware, like there's no where with etzem. He said he's saying it spreads everywhere.
That's our mode of speech. We have no other way of expression.
Where is it spreading? And it's already
It's not spreading. It's called Oyin Seif. Oyin Seif means that it is an oil whose presence is inherent. And yes, there's no where. It's not like you say Oyin Seif. And I mentioned you have to remember. Ein Seif is not a state that is a result of accumulation of finite entities. You cannot accumulate Ein Seif. Like we're saying, sorry, I'm taking you back to another arena, but it's the same thing. Now we're saying we cannot see the end of space. And therefore we conclude that space is infinite. Not true, because we see it's very big, but space consists of measurable parts. Right? In measurable parts, you can have a house of this big or this big, and that's all measuring space. How big is your house? So space, that's what the Alter Rebbe says. World is mokim zman. Mokim is yamin smoil ve'emtz mizach ma'alev b'tofno dor. Anything that has dimensions is not inside. How is it that we perceive the space as endless? This is the similar thing. How do they perceive the space as endless? If space is actually immeasurable in terms of its expense? The answer is that we don't perceive the endlessness of the existing space. We perceive space as never-ending. It's not endless, it's never-ending. Why is it never-ending? Because space is representative of the godly presence. It's never-ending. In essence, what it means is this: if you begin to travel in any direction, you will never reach the end of space. Why? Because wherever you reach, the space will expand with you. Because as long as wherever you go, you are in God's domain. As long as you're in God's domain, it'll expand. The space itself will expand because there is a godly presence. Just like the space in your home expands with your presence. If your home becomes bigger, if you become bigger, your home becomes bigger. And if you're able to afford it, your home becomes bigger, and automatically you're there. In other words, this is a very, very fine and very important principle, if we can really relate to it. Yes, indeed, we live in mokim zman, but that's only functionally. But our real, so to speak, in the stomach perception, we're not in mokim zman. We exist because we're in God's domain. This is what enables us to be. Again, calling the bluff of the scientists. No, it is the space that provides for this. It's not true. It's the godly presence that provides for everything. Okay, there's much to speak on it, obviously.
So when the Ayin Seif is conceal, is Mitzamtzem itself, this is like basically making room for another presence.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it expands to make
Right.
everything like itself.
Exactly. Let's take us in our little world, okay? The king, he is everywhere in the country. Everywhere. Then he says, I want to have a country. So he moves into a palace and leaves the rest of the country for his countrymen. His countrymen, in his country. But the reason now he has a country is because he's in the palace. His presence in the country is now through the process of the palace, and through the tzimtzum and so forth. He rules from the palace. He comes out to the window and waves, and that's his presence. But he himself is not everywhere, because if he were, there wouldn't be no country. In the actual presence of the king, you can't function. Even though when you're outside the palace, you're still in the presence of the king. You get it? The only years the Rebbe used to go to chasanas. The Rebbe himself used to go to chasanas. And the Rebbe was at the Kedushin, and he was at the Kabbalah Sponim, but after that he didn't go to the chasana. Very early he went to the chasana, all the afterwards, because you couldn't really express it, you couldn't really do your thing for the chasana. The Rebbe is sitting there. Okay. Let us see where we can do our thing over here.
It's like being in Yechidus.
What?
On Yechidus, people, like, sometimes people can't even speak when they go to Yechidus.
That's right, that's when you write a note. Okay. All right, again, in the line begins Shazehu, Bechinas Nekuda Levad Legabe Hoyer Nisoif. It's only a Nekuda Legabe Hoyer Nisoif. The Hoyer Nisoif is the Nekuda is only an allusion to the Hoyer Nisoif. The Hoyer Nisoif is the actual Hoyer Nisoif, the actual presence. Umeha Nekuda. No, let's go up. B'derech klal, I'm sorry, I didn't elaborate on that so much. B'derech klal, in general, what is the principle of this nakuda? Hu shekoileles kol bechinas ha'oyer sheyizgala bo'elomis. That this nakuda actually includes all the aspect of the oyer that will ultimately surface in the world. Shezehu bechinas Nakuda levad legabe hoyeres, and this is only nakuda levad legabe hoyeres. Oyer sheis gala bo'elomis is only the aspect of a nakuda relative to the hoyeres. As we just now finished saying that a nakuda permits there to be that which is outside of the nakuda. That's what's yizgala bo'elomis. The Nekuda permits that there should be an oil that will misgala in oilmas.
The Nekuda is like the king in the palace.
The Nekuda is like the king in the palace. Translated in the human being, we spoke about that there is Oneg and Rotzen, the Kesser, and then there is chochmah. Chochmah is exactly the same thing as the Oneg, we say. Chochmah and Oneg is one thing, except that chochmah it includes everything, all the koiches and nefesh that will surface once it's mislavish in the guf. These koiches also come from the Oneg, but they will never be able to be drawn from the Oneg. Then it will be completely overwhelmed. From chochmah they can be drawn. Why? As we pointed out, that one of the great things of chochmah is like eyesight, that you see the Inyan clearly, but there is an outside, and you can draw from it. Oneg does not have an outside.
You can draw from it
From chochmah.
into the outside.
Yeah, we can go from here and interpret this is how this is how this, and many there is infinite details in chochmah. There's no details in Ayin. This is the second call. Okay. Since I mentioned Oneg does not have an outside, utilizing the opportunity because we have nobody mentioned Oneg and things like that, we have a little bit of a confusion because the world speaks about Oneg all the time. La plaisir. You know, go to the theaters. Oh, what else? Ruchnische Oneg. Spiritual Oneg. That this moment that we discuss points to the fallacy in this. Oneg does not have an outside. Oneg ha-nefesh means that you recognize the fundamental truth, which is everywhere. Then from this you can draw into chochmah and interpret your life. But if you're going to experience the Oneg itself, that's a fallacy. This is like eliminating the Oneg and focusing on the experience. Oneg has an Oneg ha-nefesh that can only relate to infinity. Again, let me put it into concrete terms. We said the other day that if you could have all the supplies you need in your world through thievery, you would not be happy. You will not be happy. If you ask any psychologist, he will say, yes, you will not be happy. And you say, why will I not be happy? Because you can boast that you accomplished something. What do we say? You will not be happy because there's no reality to it. You're still a stranger in the world. As much as you have, you're a stranger in the world because none of this really belongs to you. Contrast that to saying, oh, because you can't show up what you've accomplished. That's a complete misinterpretation of the Oneg ha-nefesh. This is where the principle of yeshus comes. You know, my yeshus, that makes me real in the world, but it doesn't. It's fooling yourself.
What's an example of my yeshus in the world? Makes me real. Applause. Like covered.
Well, depends. COVID is wonderful. Depends what in what way. But if it is focused on the yeshus, yeah.
Because we also said covered is a real thing.
Okay. Let's go down. Okay. A good day. Okay, now.
Yes, I guess.
Tonight we're going to have a regular seder. Tomorrow.